Welcome to Talking Supply Chain. In each episode, top supply chain industry professionals and the nation's top thought leaders join host Brian Strait and share their unique insights to help supply chain managers stay one step ahead of their competition. This is Talking Supply Chain. Hello, and welcome to Talking Supply Chain. My name is Brian Strait, and today we're going to tackle the topic of retail fulfillment. Everyone's been talking about omni-channel fulfillment, but is that really the best way of getting product into customers' hands? Our guest today is going to help us answer that question. Bill Thayer is founder and CEO of Fillogic, which takes excess space in retail locations and turns it into fulfillment centers serving the middle mile. Prior to founding Fillogic in 2018, Bill's career had taken him on a varied retail and logistics journey. He has more than 30 years of experience in retail logistics, e-commerce, technology, store operations, and consulting. He started his career at Macy's in the buyer training program, and eventually came full circle, returning to Macy's, I should say, later in his career to help them design and set up their backstage logistics network. During his career, Bill identified what he felt was a gap in the logistics capabilities that support physical retail locations, and that helped lead to the founding of Fillogic. Bill, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Brian, thank you for having me. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great. I'm glad to have you here. I'm excited to get into this topic a little bit with you. I gave a little bit of background, but I was wondering if you could give a little more about yourself and what you guys are doing at Fillogic to help our audience kind of understand and set the stage for what we're going to discuss today.
Sure. I think one of the most important pieces of what we look at, physical retail is the core of what happens in retail today. Over 75% of sales still come from a physical location, but it's poorly served by logistics and logistics technology. And so back in 2018, we saw that gap, said, hey, how can we make these locations operate more efficiently logistically? Because when you look at malls, for example, they are retail experience platforms, right? They build beautiful buildings and they provide it for those retailers to experience. They also have food and experiential, but that fourth pillar of logistics and logistics technology has never really existed. Retailers try to do that within their own networks. Walmart does a great job of that. Target does a great job of that. But when you think about aggregating the demand of all retailers across that infrastructure, there's never been an agnostic B2B logistics infrastructure platform until us. We're big believers that the future is about physical retail, and it's not just the digital or physical, it's about everything. And that's sort of the backup of what we call channel-free logistics.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I wanted to get you on here because you guys tout this channel-free logistics. I think if I say omni-channel fulfillment, everybody I think is familiar with that, right? I mean, and many people are doing it. Some people are doing it very well.
Mm-hmm.
But you're kind of talking about this channel-free logistics. Can you kind of explain what exactly that is? And
Sure.
I mean, is that just simply an extension of omni-channel fulfillment, or is this something really different?
So the way we look at it is omni-channel is something that was built 20 or 30 years ago and nobody understood what digital commerce was going to be. Back in the old days in retail, when we talked about e-commerce, that was the shiny object. It was put off to the side. It was run by usually marketing divisions.
Mhm.
Then when it became a larger business, you tried to consolidate that within existing infrastructure. Nobody did that very well. You had your e-commerce merchants, you had your e-commerce platforms, you had e-commerce fulfillment, you name it. And that basically jumbled up a network. So you had logistics infrastructure problems at retailers, technology problems at retailers, and sort of understanding sort of the front end about how you communicate. That is where the term omni-channel came from. Omni-channel and channels denote silos, they denote walls, they denote infrastructure, but at the same time, cost, lack of speed and efficiency.
Mhm.
And what I think we've learned over the last 10 years, and if nobody understood it during the pandemic, they definitely get it now. Customers don't think in channels. They never have. They've always thought about, hey, I want to buy my stuff. I don't care if it comes from a retail store. I don't care if it comes as a drop ship. It doesn't matter to me. Retailer, that's your problem. And many retailers have tried to dictate terms to say, okay, customer, this is how you're going to shop. Amazon has always been customer focused. Great, makes sense. A lot of the other larger retailers have been pretty good about that sort of direction. Our whole point is channel free means how do you build logistics networks and the technology that supports them to support that channel free vision of the future, which is a customer vision, which how can I meet the demand of the customer wherever they are? In many cases, it could be a brand that sells from their stores, but it also sells through a dropship partner that also sells from an integration partner. I think, well, we know from what we've seen over the last few years is the future is about collaboration, and retailers, brands, technology companies, as well as logistics service providers all have to operate collaboratively and at scale to be able to support channel free logistics. So,
Mhm.
channel free logistics is pretty much all that channel stuff that's been built, throw it away, build off of your existing infrastructure. Think about it this way. There's been so much talk about the demise of malls and physical retail. It's not just about malls, it's about the right malls. So, yeah, are we overstored in this country? Still, yeah, absolutely. But the best malls with the best mall owners are still very successful. And channel free logistics only makes their business better and only makes those retailers' business better because it's all about simplifying and and or simplifying the process because omni-channels only worked for one group of people, consultants. They made a ton of money off of it. Great, God bless them. Also technology folks as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, those days are over. Simplification, collaboration, that's the future.
Yeah. So as you talk about this, I mean, you kind of touched on this. I was going to read a quote from your website that I actually had found, and I kind of liked it, and I kind of felt it summarized. But I think you may have just
Well, thank you. We put a lot of effort into that website.
I think you may have just done it. I'm happy to read it if you want, but I think you may have kind of just summed up what the quote really was about anyway. There, but I wanted to get to like, even in the channel free logistics. I mean, there's still logistics as part of this, right? So that requires an infrastructure of some sort. I mean, you've talked about malls and space
Mhm.
space and things like that. So, can you talk about it in order for channel free logistics to be successful? What does that infrastructure have to look like?
Sure. And so our whole point is I spent my career in large buildings. I love unit sorter and heavy mechanics and optimization and automation. Love that stuff. That's not our business. Our business is taking underutilized spaces. In many cases, they're not contiguous. Unfortunately, when you look at what happened in omnichannel, a lot of what happens in the engineering space is okay, to be efficient, you need a 200,000 square foot building, 40-foot clear, with a lot of robots running around in it. Who can afford that anymore? Industrial real estate has never been more expensive. Granted, there's a lot of capacity out there now. Just ask Amazon; they can sell you a building or lease you a building. But
Yep.
the component to us is a flexible network using existing infrastructure, retail infrastructure, and deploying the technology and the operations logistically. So we have buildings that are as big as 100,000, over 150,000 square feet, and we have buildings that are 4,000 square feet. Is what is the need of the retailer and the demand in that location, and what are we going to deploy to it? But I'll tell you this much: all of that demand and that need is around existing mall infrastructure in this country. It's where people live, it's where they transact, it's where they do returns, it's where they live their lives. And getting further and further into the middle of a cornfield, it's not sustainable. It is definitely not circular. Our whole point is getting closer. It's faster. It's more efficient. And from our perspective, we don't look at circularity and sustainability as something else you do. It's more of a process that we live with upfront. It's an
Yeah.
important part of that business.
And just like as an aside, I mean, I've loved. I visited some malls recently, and look, I mean, it's not if I said that, hey, 50% of malls are empty these days, and it's not exactly not a number. I don't know what the number actually is, but it seems like that, right? You walk into a mall and it seems like half of it's empty.
Mhm.
There's a lot of space there, but I really have loved what some of the mall operators seem to be doing these days, and kind of really turning them back into destinations. I mean, there's
Correct.
all sorts of different things going on now. You go to the mall and you can do entertainment, you can do restaurants, you can do shopping. It's no longer just you walk into your stores and you walk out kind of thing. So this kind of usage of the space, I think, fits nicely into that. It makes that mall operator, gives them something to fill all the space and create use more capacity, right? I mean, if you're renting space, you're making money as a mall operator. You guys are doing it by the same way. By taking that space, you're helping out these retailers.
Correct. And I think the most important thing to understand here is the right mall owner. So a perfect example is Simon Property Group, largest mall owner in the US. They've always understood that they're a platform for retail.
Hmm.
And what they've heard from their retail tenants is we need help on how we're going to handle logistics. What are solutions that you can bring to the fore to help us be more efficient? But what they also understand is if you're not providing a solution that's agnostic and cross platform, mall owner agnostic, retailer agnostic, carrier agnostic, technology agnostic, then it's not going to work. This is not something that you can own. This is an ecosystem play that allows retailers to cross multiple location, cross regions. Because when we talk with retailers, we kind of take what we call the logistics Swiss Army knife approach. We say there's a lot of things going on our logistics Swiss Army knife, but what's your big blade? What's the thing that matters the most to you? Because you don't need the tweezers and nobody needs the magnifying glass anymore. What are the things that you need? And what's helped us is we're an end-to-end supply chain solution. We're not we don't just do returns and we don't just do e-commerce fulfillment. We're providing solutions to all retailers wherever they are because most of their problems are multifaceted, multi-regional, they're technology related, they're logistics related, and it's being able to provide that solution, the way it's been communicated to as we open buildings. We're providing an accessory solution to the primary solution of what malls were created for, aggregated retail. We're providing the aggregated logistics to support that.
Yeah. So that means might be multiple retailers in a single location then.
Our whole goal is to service every single retailer in that particular building, as well as digitally native brands that want to use the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Once again, it is truly an ecosystem play. Look at where malls are built. Look at their transportation, patterns around those malls, docks, good movement for traffic, transportation. Trust me, we're not parking 53-foot trailers out there. This is
Yeah.
very low impact on spaces. And from the perspective of the buildings that we've opened, it works well with the environment and the community. When you look at what's happening right now, a lot of communities, when they hear about a large distribution center coming into the region, they are actively working against it. Once again, we're using existing infrastructure. We have one industrial building that in 2 months will be completely in malls, and that is our main goal in malls or aggregated retail of some sort because it's the ecosystem play.
Yeah. So, as you talk about, hey, the advantages to the mall operators, the advantages to the retailers, right, and consolidating this stuff. What I keep hearing in my mind, and maybe you're kind of saying this, but not actually saying this, right, is that this is maybe more of a customer first approach to logistics, right? And the idea is to get the goods to the customers as easily and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean,
So
think about it. Channel free is once again, customers don't care about your retail problems. They want their stuff. They want it shipped fast, shipped cheap, price comparison, price normalization, and return as fast as possible. Where do you do that? Closer to where those people live. And if you're able to do that, less touches, less time, less fossil fuels. I mean, you name it. Better utilization of labor, everything, because everybody lives around shopping malls. Lots of
yeah,
good jobs in those areas.
yeah. So how does that work then, with the customer, the customer demand these days to get their items that day or the next day, or 2-day delivery windows? If you're talking about smaller facilities, right, with multiple retailers, you're not
Mhm.
you're not stocking the inventory to fill whatever that customer may need, right?
So we do that now. We manage and stage inventory, but as we are working with customers right now, long term goal is to deploy the technology and the operations to aggregate to use store inventory to continually to support the store inventory. Whether some programs that we're actively working on now with our delivery marketplace and our network is being able to aggregate outbound demand, whether it is zone skipping of freight into our buildings where we sort it and push it into our outbound network, returns, being able to handle returns in an aggregated, partners like Narvar and Loop are platform partners to us. Once again, we're not picking winners about which customers. Our whole goal is to build an ecosystem that every retailer can use, because that's the way malls are, right? You're building a platform for a retailer to be able to use it. We want to do the same thing from the logistics perspective.
So then if it's operating at peak efficiency, then the customer would not be expected to say, "Hey, well, I'm going to get this item in 5 days now because my local fulfillment center doesn't have it." Right? I mean,
Mhm.
you'd still be able to fulfill that item. I imagine that's probably ties into inventory management, and some of the other technologies that retailers need to use
Correct. I
and
mean,
leverage. Right?
yeah, when you look at store inventory, retailers have a big problem when they're trying to manage the what their on hands are. part of the problem is they're using their OMS and deploying that in to view inventory in stores.
Mhm.
Stores have these things called customers. Customers touch, move, change, ticket switch, any number of different things. So the mechanics of how you manage waving, batching are different. And the ability to say, hey, can I aggregate in a region um, short shipped or short picked items that you can do it centrally in a particular region, whether it's one Fillogic hub that supports multiple malls in a region. I mean, once again, it's the optionality to do both because once again, we don't look at ourselves as saying, okay, we're gonna have these big enterprise 250,000 square foot buildings. That's not us. It's not.
Yeah.
It's too expensive. There's way too much competition. And look, we look at ourselves we will work with anybody. We'll work with retailers, brands, digitally native brands, 3PLs, parcel carriers, you name it. Our whole point is it's an ecosystem that everybody uses, and we kind of look at it this way: it's the many tentacled logistics octopus. Who
Yeah.
do we play? Who do we work with?
Yeah. You mentioned in a previous answer, you mentioned returns, and I want to get into returns and how this model works with returns. National Retail Federation says, hey, reverse logistics, big costs for businesses, right?
Sure.
Numbers I've seen anywhere from 360 billion to 1.8 trillion, which is this massive range, which tells me that we don't really know what reverse logistics actually is costing us these days very well. Um, but in order to handle returns, there's all these added costs. I mean, it can cost 10% of the total cost of goods, for instance, to return an item, depending on what that item is. There's the lack of visibility to items that return. Can that item be resold? Does it need to be repaired? Does it need to be trashed or donated? There's a lot of questions involved in that. So as you implement this channel-free logistics approach for retailers and operations, how do returns fit into this equation for you guys?
Yep. And I appreciate you bringing that up because this is the part of our business that is based on some proprietary technology that we've built and deployed with people like Narvar and Loop. This is one of our biggest growth opportunities because, yeah, there's cost that's associated with it. And I think one of the biggest problems that is out there, there's a lot of platforms which will get the customer their money back.
Hmm.
But from the retailer's perspective, and think about apparel retail, you're looking at a 25% return rate. But that return, let's say you ship 100 units and 25 units are always coming back. But in many cases, for a lot of these returns networks that are out there, the return process, you want the lowest cost of freight. You want to do as much as you possibly can. But if it's going back through the reverse logistics supply chain, stuff could be sitting in a box for weeks. And that
Yeah.
is a margin drain. Think about taking, apparel. Apparel is usually on an 8-week markdown cycle. If 25% of what you shipped is sitting in a box for half of its markdown cycle, wow, that's huge. So way we've built it is by doing returns in the middle mile, which is of course where malls are located. What we've been able to show is it's anywhere from 50 to 70% faster for our customers that are using that infrastructure right now. And they're because it's faster, they're getting 180% return increased on full price selling by using our network because it's all about the aggregation and being able to do the receipt, the grading of that product as close to the point of return as possible. At the same time as we're building out with other customers, if those returns can be happening in that middle mile, it gives the opportunity for the retailers, hey, not only do we do the returns, but if any inventory that's class A, class B, which is or quality A, quality B, which is first quality merchandise, the ability to drop an order and fulfill it, or the ability to take action on it. I call it solving the Shaq problem. Shaq's got a big foot. If Shaq, drops off a shoe at a C or a D level store, that inventory is going to be a markdown. The ability to take returns and route it to where it can sell, it's a huge component of it because yes, reverse logistics is very expensive and it is very slow. But the margin impact of what that means, I don't have all the metrics on it. I don't have a crystal ball, that's for sure. My crystal ball is a little cracked and cloudy. But the important piece here is that we just haven't scratched the surface, right? Omnichannel has been breaking everybody else's models for the last couple of years. The return process is part of that. So the issue is use your stores, use your infrastructure closer to where your consumers are. Let that be the first point of where you're touching and doing your returns. If you're sending it back through your reverse logistics network, your distribution centers don't want to see it, they don't want to touch it, and they're not going to touch it fast.
Yep.
Full stop.
So are you guys, when stuff comes back to you, to one of your facilities, do you have people there that are judging whether that can be resold or not? I mean, how is that being?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're doing that there for them, for those
Yep.
retailers.
Correct. We take an image if something is slightly blemished because that inventory is eligible for recommerce, and
Yep.
the ability to say, hey, here's an endpoint that we have that you retailer either can integrate, or a lot of these great recommerce platforms we're working with, a company like Recurate's a partner of ours. The ability to say, hey, that business is made because you have product detail. If you plug that into recommerce platforms, it's an easy way for those folks to do business. And I think where the sustainability and circularity comes in, what we call grade D, which is truly damaged. When you look at people who liquidate damaged inventory, it's like, okay, what's the best deal I got for somebody who's going to put it into a landfill? Our whole point is if you separate it by product type, right? What's cotton? What is blend? However you can bring it, it's not so much at this retailer's cotton t-shirts. It's all cotton t-shirts. And who will use that product either to recycle it or to be used as pillow stuffing, any number of things. There's a whole marketplace in and of itself for that. And that to us is what we think as, as a circularity sustainability platform. What are the options there? How can we avoid landfill product as much as we possibly can? One of the things that happens on returns, what we're seeing is bagless returns. Bagless returns is a way that people are trying to say, hey, I don't put boxes and bags into the ecosystem. But bagless returns, as we see it, most of that inventory in some cases is getting damaged when it's coming back through that network. We see it come through some of our partners. And when we look at it, if we're able to handle it in the middle mile for the first 2 days, imagine what that inventory looks like and how it's been stepped on 5 times until it gets back to that major distribution center. So
Yep.
bagless returns, forget about it. I think a big thing is how do you get to the point where the packaging that goes outbound from a retailer, how do you make that recyclable? We have some partnerships with some large, providers that I will not mention, but the ability to say, I'm going to take a bag back that is recyclable. And so when I'm processing the return, I'm going to take that poly bag and I'm not going to throw it away that goes direct to a landfill. I'm going to be able to make that recyclable. That makes your outbound and your inbound and your returns and stock balancing much more cost effective and efficient.
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies out there. I'm not going to get into any of them either. I don't know who you guys work with and whatnot, but the reusable packaging, the re-commerce sites, a lot of those places do really well,
Exactly.
and are providing a great service, I think, for items that maybe can't be resold into a
Correct.
store or online and whatnot. So it's a great way to, especially for the retailer perspective, to still recoup some revenue on that product.
Right, exactly. And our returns platform is not built just for e-commerce returns. It's also built for store returns. Once again, the key thing for allowing, let's say, re-commerce to work is item level detail and fabric content. So if you're able to say, I've got this product back, whether it's from a store or a customer, and being able to say it's damaged, but whoever's going to be in the re-commerce space that they want to sell it, if you have that product level detail, they can pull images from the web and they can actually sell it. You can truly, I mean, re-commerce is a huge business that we help make profitable and efficient because it's that product level detail that's so important.
Yep. Yep. We got a few minutes left. I want to shift gears just slightly and talk a little bit about Fillogic
Mhm.
here. Um, in November,
Why?
you
Just kidding.
why? Because I'm a New England Patriots fan and I don't want to
Oh
discuss
boy.
them. For those of you that are football fans,
Come on, man.
um,
You had a couple of good years.
yeah, a few years it worked out well for now. Now I feel like I'm back in my youth again, watching the team. Um, so back in November, you guys closed a $13 million Series A
Mhm.
investment round led by Revelry Venture Partners, I believe.
Absolutely.
Um, two interesting points that, when I read the press release about that was, and the first one was one that you were able to close a funding round during a time when investors have kind of shied away from logistics related investments these days.
Mhm.
And the investment community itself has been down in 2023 anyway.
Yep.
And the second reason is it's giving you an opportunity to really expand and do that kind of quickly. So the 2 points there. So on the first point, as you went out looking for the funding round, did you guys have trouble finding investors interested in getting involved in your business? And what did you find that environment like as you were doing that?
Well, as a logistics person, I'm a logistics snob. I've lived most of my life in retail. I love logistics, love technology. Raising money is not something that I'm a specialist at, but As starting a company that's venture backed, you got to get good at it.
Right.
I think I'm very lucky to have an astounding board to support the business. But I think one of the things is we've got some pretty tremendous proof points. We've grown a couple of 100% each year for the last 3 years. I'm not going to go into those details. But once again, we are a differentiated platform because once again, we're not your traditional, like think about it this way. We get compared sometimes to 3PLs, but 3PLs are about optimizing their existing infrastructure, right? Their buildings, their infrastructure, their people. We're about what the future is. Channel free logistics is using existing infrastructure, malls, using existing inventory that's in that region, retailers' inventory, using everything that is completely different and anathema to what the last 20 years have been. So
Yeah.
that's a differentiator for us, but also the ability, our growth being able to show it and the true metrics that we've been able to show people from a success perspective. Um, you know, let's be fair. It's not easy. I don't think it's ever supposed to be easy. But I think we've got a lot of good things going on. We've built a lot of great things from the technology perspective that differentiates us from others. And so I like to think that that is a big part of it.
Okay. And the second part of that question really is moving forward. I mean, you've got this fresh funding, and obviously it sounds like you guys have been very successful in what you've done already to this point. I think you have 8 locations, 6 more in the works, and you're planning 20 more or something like that.
Minimally
Um,
correct.
yeah. Can you kind of talk about one when you look for a location to go into, what
Mhm.
exactly are you looking for from that standpoint, from that location? Is it geography? Is it access to retailers, et cetera? And then what where do you see Fillogic going in the next few years?
Sure. Great question. Thank you for that. I think what's really important is to understand as an ecosystem, we look where malls are. So where B and A plus malls are, that's where we want to be. It's usually distinct marketing areas through the U.S. We have a plan to get to a specific group of DMAs by the end of 2024. Don't want to get too much into that detail, but it's about having enough of that infrastructure to truly say we have a national network. And I think one of the most important pieces is from Fillogic, a retailer builds an integration to us once. We can turn them on in any one of our facilities just through a configuration, and that gives retailers an instant network. And at the same time, that ecosystem play opens up lots of additional opportunities for brands that want to expand their footprint, expand with us. We just signed a Fortune 100 brand that we'll announce later this year that is launching a product in the United States that we are going to be their only provider. That in and of itself shows that people are really starting to understand. And let's just put it this way: channel free as a process. Um, everybody understands that. And as we look at from a channel free ecosystem, we want to be where the people are. People are around malls, and where we're around malls, that's great. Now, after the next year and a half to 2 years, lots of interest for international expansion because where there's people, believe it or not, there's malls. There's thousands of malls across the world. We were in Europe last week. Was it last week? I can't remember. And there's malls there where whatever we do, aggregated retail, there is a need and an interest for aggregated logistics.
Yeah. And I think if we've learned anything, people still love to shop.
Uh, We are social beings.
Yep.
This is why work from home. Okay, don't drive me crazy. People want to. I can communicate via Zoom, and we can have these great conversations. Fantastic. But if we are really going to know each other and work with each other, we have to be together. There's
Yep.
just no way. There's just no way around it. And you're right. I always look at it from this way, and I don't want to cause too much shade. CNBC has been talking about the death of the mall forever.
Yep.
Stop, stop. I mean, just look at Simon. Simon is growing and evolving. The best malls are doing very, very well, and they will continue to do well because they're the folks that understand the future still physical.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And going back to going back right to the very beginning when I mentioned with the malls and the things I've seen and how they've to me it's almost like the when the malls started. I don't know when malls started, in the 40s, 30s, 50s, whatever that whatever
Yep.
that was.
Mhm.
Well, before my time on um they were designed as centerpieces of the community and destinations, right, for
Correct.
people in the community to go. And that was the point of them. And then they started moving away from urban centers, and out into suburbs and things like that, and it kind of died a little bit. And we've had these obviously rapid changes in retail over the last several years, but over the last 40 years, retail has been changing, and it keeps changing, and will continue to change.
Hmm.
And now I see the malls reinventing themselves and going back to that destination site where you can go and 50 years ago you went just to do your shopping. Now you're going to do some shopping. You might let the kids go play, in some of the activity centers that are taking place. I mean, in our local mall, we've got a slingshot store. You can
Hmm.
go in and practice slingshotting, and knocking bottles and things down. And we've got a gaming center set up for people who are into Dungeons and Dragons and games like that. So you're getting it's really becoming a centerpiece of communities in some cases.
And
And
right in the basement or an elbow joint or a demised department store, that is where Fillogic
amazing.
is.
Yep. Yep. So, you guys, unfortunately, if you visit the mall, you won't be the see for Logic, but they're there helping you. Just know
We're
that.
once again, we are back end infrastructure. That's our whole goal. We do have some customer facing components to the business for returns. Once again, when you look at returns, returns should be every option of returns that you have to drop off, whether it's UPS, whether it's FedEx. This is a component because retailers are looking for options, and everybody's a little bit different from a business model perspective. And our whole point is we really don't care. Our whole point is we want to manage the logistics and logistics technology component to it, because the bigger the box, the lower the cost per unit. And that's a whole thing of what we're focused on.
Yep. Bill, thank you so much for time today. Want to give you for people who might be interested in getting in touch with Logic, how might they go about doing that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you go to Fillogic.com. That's Fillogic.com. You can reach us on LinkedIn. We're pretty active out there. Yeah, we're around. Easy to find us.
Yep. I found you, so I'm
That's
sure
good.
they can as well.
We appreciate
I
that.
think many of my listeners, I think, are much smarter than I, so they'll find you as well. So, Bill, thank you very much. I want to thank you for coming on and speaking with us today and tell us a little bit more
Thank you.
about Logic and the business you guys are in. And a special thank you to all of you out there listening today. I greatly appreciate you spending time with us. For Supply Chain Management Review and Talking Supply Chain Podcast, I'm Brian Straight. Thank you for listening. Talking Supply Chain is produced by Supply Chain Management Review and Peerless Media. You can find it on scmr.com, supplychain247.com, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. For more information on this topic or to sign up for our weekly newsletter, a print or a digital subscription to our publication, visit scmr.com. We hope you will join us for our next episode. For Supply Chain Management Review, I'm Brian Straight, and thank you for listening.